Hey y'all! In 2021, an underreported serial killer stalked Southern Virginia, targeting women from dating apps. Most frighteningly, police worry they've only begun to uncover the extent of his crimes. A listener note, this story covers sex-based crimes and may not be appropriate for everyone. I'm Candace, and I'll be your guide. On October 24th, 2021, Amanda May texted her 54-year-old mother, Beth Redmond, to find out why she wasn't at home. The two lived together in Harrisonburg, Virginia, with Amanda's children. Beth responded that she was watching football. After some more prompting, she admitted that she was at the Howard Johnson Motel, but when her daughter asked who she was there with, her mother just responded with, "None of your business," and also refused to tell her daughter the room number. Amanda said the conversation wasn't out of the ordinary for the two, so she just assumed her mother was with a friend and didn't want to tell her. However, this was the last time that Amanda would hear from Beth Redmond. After weeks of no response, as well as taking note of her mother's absence on social media, she reported her mother missing to local police, and they began an investigation. Around the same time, a Charlottesville, Virginia resident, Nita Smith, a 39-year-old mother of 6, was also reported missing by her loved ones, and an ensuing missing persons search was enacted for her as well. During the investigation for Beth Redmond, police used cell phone data to confirm that she had indeed been in the area of the Howard Johnson Motel. On November 23, 2021, police set off on a foot search in the area surrounding the motel. In the parking lot of a wooded area nearby, they spot a shopping cart. Investigating the woods farther, they find the bodies of Beth Redmond and Nita Smith, about 15 feet apart, both of them wrapped in bed sheets. At this point, these women had been 2 separate missing persons cases, and it hadn't been a concern that the 2 cases were connected until the discovery of the bodies together. Smith was found with wrists and ankles bound with black yarn, nude from the waist down with her bra and top pulled up. Redmond was in a more advanced state of decomposition, according to the medical examiner, and was found completely nude. Upon further investigation, surveillance footage was obtained showing an unidentified male leaving his room at the Howard Johnson, pushing a shopping cart covered in a blanket into the wooded area on 2 separate occasions about a month apart. Nearby, the Washington, D.C. police force were investigating a missing woman of their own. 29-year-old Cheyenne Brown had been missing since the end of September. Cheyenne was 4 months pregnant and had a 7-year-old son. The D.C. police force reached out to Fairfax County, Virginia investigators to explain that in their investigations, they had surveillance footage of Cheyenne boarding the D.C. Metro train and getting off at the Huntington, Virginia station, never to be seen again. Using some unspecified digital data that could be assumed to be cell tower data, they believe that Cheyenne was last seen in the area of the Moon Inn, a small motel in Alexandria, Virginia. The Fairfax County PD visited the area with a cadaver dog but didn't find anything of note. On November 23, 2021, police announced the arrest of 35-year-old D.C. resident Anthony Robinson as the alleged murderer. Cell phone data helped connect that Robinson, as well as Beth Redmond and Nita Smith, had been in the area at the approximate time of the murders. Robinson's phone also pinged in the location of that Huntington Metro stop the night that Cheyenne Brown arrived from the train. He was also spotted on the surveillance footage in each case, as well as on Walmart surveillance footage purchasing the black yarn that appears to be the same yarn he allegedly used to bind the wrists and ankles of Nita Smith. They deduced that the women had been in contact with Robinson through dating apps, and that is likely how he lured them each to his location. Interestingly, Robinson has a remarkable lack of a criminal record, and at the time was working at Pilgrim's Pride in Timberville, Virginia. So police have a clear MO. Anthony Robinson was meeting women on the dating apps Tagged as well as Plenty of Fish, and setting up dates at local motels where he had been staying before killing the women using blunt force trauma and transporting the women's bodies to the wooded area nearby for disposal. Although Anthony Robinson has a DC address, he is known to be a bit of a drifter, spending indeterminate amounts of time at area motels as far south as Washington, D.C., and as far north as New York, transiently roaming the East Coast. While investigating his hotel room, police found blood on the bed, as well as clothing and a phone belonging to Nita Smith. A search of Robinson's phone found that from August to November, he had visited a total of 12,000 porn sites in which he'd been searching specifically for videos with women who matched the physical descriptions of his alleged victims, Beth Redmond and Nita Smith, the deaths of whom attorney Marcia Garst described as sadosexual. Upon Robinson's initial questioning, he had explained that he'd met Redmond and Smith on dating sites, and they'd come to his motel room for dates. He explained that each of them had taken a white pill and overdosed, and he woke up to find them dead. However, as difficult as the autopsies were given the state of decomposition, toxicology reports don't back this up. According to the data, Redmond did have meth in her system, but it was determined to likely be too little for an overdose that would cause her death. And I only even mention the meth because, in my opinion, it reflects some likely accuracy in the toxicology report, and it's an argument against his statements of innocence in her death. To be clear, whether any of these women use drugs or not is not the reason that they are no longer here for their families, nor is it any reason why the case should not be taken as seriously as is warranted. On December 15th, 2021, police returned to the area of the Moon Inn, and in a nearby wooded area, spot a shopping cart. Although these are different investigators than previously, they do recall how 2 bodies were found near a shopping cart before, so they investigate the area more thoroughly. Not far from the shopping cart, they spot a black plastic bin. Inside the bin were the remains of pregnant mother Cheyenne Brown. However, nearby her remains are those of yet another woman. The other woman was later identified to be Stephanie Harrison, a 48-year-old mother from Northern California who'd been visiting the D.C. area. Stephanie had last been heard from on August 19th, when she called her sister to tell her how she'd been visiting the U.S. Capitol building that day. Stephanie's credit card was then used to book a room at the Moon Inn that night. Stephanie had been missing for months at this point when her body was discovered. Stephanie's family calls her a beloved mother and an even better grandmother. Behind the scenes, police were busy working with more surveillance footage, some unspecified digital data, as well as cell phone tower pings and more information from the dating apps. On December 15th, 2021, Fairfax County Chief of Police Kevin Davis officially announced that they had a serial killer on their hands, deeming him the shopping cart killer. They also retroactively determined that a body found September 7th, 2021, identified as a 40-year-old D.C. woman, Sonia Champ, whose body was also found in a shopping cart, is deemed the 5th victim of Anthony Robinson. After Robinson's arrest, another family came forward, the family of 30-year-old woman Sky Allen. Sky's mother, Stacy, explains that Sky and Robinson had been living together after meeting on a dating app, when Stacy entered Sky's bedroom to find her unconscious and struggling to breathe on Valentine's Day 2018. Sky later passed away, and her death was determined to be cardiac arrhythmia. However, Stacy always suspected Robinson to be the cause in Sky's death, and no one in the family had ever trusted him. Stacy explains, quote, "I asked him, 'Did you do something to my daughter?' He said no," end quote. As of this time, Robinson has not been charged with or determined to be the cause of Skye's death, and the investigation is further complicated by the fact that Skye was cremated. It is worth noting that a fatal cardiac arrhythmia can be caused by numerous natural causes, as well as by foul play, if determined to be the result of asphyxiation, blunt force trauma, or some other assault. If Robinson is determined to have caused Skye's death, then she will be considered his sixth victim. It is worth noting, on November 10th, another woman was seen entering and thankfully exiting Robinson's hotel room on surveillance video, between the dates of the murders of Redmond and Smith. It's unclear from the sources I can find whether police have located this woman for questioning. Since this investigation, case, and entire trial process is still ongoing, and more than half of these bodies had not been linked to the case until after Robinson's arrest, the most recent information I can find is from back in early 2022. This states that Anthony Robinson was being charged with first-degree murder for the deaths of Beth Redmond and Nita Smith, as well as 2 charges of improper disposal or transport of a body. A judge declared that there was enough evidence of premeditation to go before a grand jury to determine if there's probable cause for a murder trial. Somehow, there was some disagreement if the crimes were premeditated, but at this moment, the first-degree charge stands. I imagine he will be facing at least 3 more counts of first-degree murder from the identified victims that we have. The trial is currently set for August and September 2023. However, the defense surprised everyone when they revealed at an October 2021 hearing that Robinson has a history of an unspecified mental illness dating back to at least 2014. They assert he was believed to be suffering from an untreated mental illness throughout the times of the crimes. The defense has subsequently requested a sanity evaluation from the information contained within those documents, as well as speaking with Robinson's family. Robinson's attorney states that the allegations against his client are, quote, so egregious such that there is reason to believe that the defendant's behavior was not rational at the time of the offense, end quote. This motion was granted and is believed to be in process, although I could find no updates thus far if this evaluation has been concluded as of yet. Frighteningly, there is reason to believe that Robinson didn't always kill upon first meetings. Nicadra Brown, the mother of Cheyenne Brown, the pregnant mother who was his 3rd victim, believes that her daughter had met him previously, likely in mid to late September while Nicadra was out of town. She reports that Cheyenne's cousin arrived to find an unknown man in their home, and when questioned, Cheyenne explains that he had nowhere else to go. This was reportedly 5 days before Cheyenne's disappearance. Currently, Anthony Robinson is being held in the Rockingham County, Virginia jail without bond. However, potentially the most concerning aspect of this case is that the FBI strongly believes Robinson did not begin his alleged murders in September 2021 with Sonia Champ. This is, of course, assuming that he had no part in his girlfriend Skye Allen's death. Given his history of being transient along the Upper East Coast throughout his adult lifetime, officials fear he could have an indeterminate number of unknown victims. As Fairfax County Chief of Police Kevin Davis states, quote, he didn't suddenly turn into who he is 3 months ago. We know who he is, thank God, but that still doesn't take away from the urgency that exists to identify any other victims that may be out there. Literally beyond the Commonwealth of Virginia and up the East Coast. Davis goes on to say, that's why we are painstakingly going through his whereabouts, his relationships, and employment history to find out if there are in fact other victims. The good thing is he's in custody. The challenge that remains is identifying other victims. End quote. The Fairfax County PD, as well as the FBI, are interested in hearing from anyone who has known Robinson personally, particularly if they met him on dating apps, even if there was no in-person encounter. Because little is known about Anthony Robinson, officials are really trying to piece together who he is. His childhood, life experiences, careers, romantic life, etc. They're also looking for information on missing persons who could potentially be victims, combing through missing persons listings to see if any match the areas Robinson was in at the time. Also, if you know anyone who went missing from the greater DC metro area while meeting someone from a dating app, that's worth a deeper look as well. Anyone with information about this case or any information about Robinson, including those he met through dating apps, should call Fairfax County PD's Major Crimes Division at 703-246-7800. Those with anonymous tips can call 1-866-411-TIPS. Okay, y'all, that's the story of the shopping cart killer. Now let's talk about it. As a woman who's used dating apps in the past, this story is particularly terrifying, especially when you consider that Cheyenne Brown may have known him for a while before ending up being murdered in his hotel room that night. As women, we understand that first dates are dangerous. You're meeting a stranger and you have no idea what they're capable of. But it's easy after a few dates to believe that the immediate danger has passed. This case is a solemn reminder that not only do you not know people you've just met online, but you really don't know someone after a few weeks or even months. Please don't allow someone you don't know well to get you in private into their car, allow them to stay in your home, things like that. That being said, there is no room for victim blaming anywhere, including this case. We have no idea how charming, manipulative, or convincing the murderer was when coercing these women to meet him in private. And it's never a victim's fault for trusting the wrong person. At this point, there's not any information about Robinson's childhood. Usually with serial killers, that information can be so enlightening about how they ended up who they are today. But his is just a blank page in the research. I'm hoping as more people come forward about knowing him, some gaps can be filled in. As it is an ongoing investigation, there isn't much to be known about the court proceedings. I wish I knew if and when that sanity evaluation was taking place. It just seems like such an easy out to say he must have been mentally ill at the time of the attacks. And it does blow my mind that there was such an argument of premeditation on these crimes. Even if the first alleged murder wasn't premeditated, how could anyone argue that the subsequent ones were not? I understand that the argument of insanity would remove the premeditated aspect, because a sane person could tell themselves that on their last date they flew off the handle and killed someone, and maybe another date at his hotel wouldn't be the best idea. The cause of death for the victims was largely a hindrance in the charges as well. As the police didn't find the victims' bodies terribly quickly, often advanced decomposition had taken place. The medical examiner states the tissue loss around the head and neck area were too extensive to give a solid cause of death, but there appeared to be blunt force trauma involved. Presumably, this means they could not rule out any other direct causes of death, but the head injuries may have been enough to cause death to the women on their own. So much also hasn't been released to the public about the victims as well, so I'm sorry if I missed any key details. For instance, with Sonia Champ, no children were mentioned in any sources I could find, and in general, I couldn't find anything relating to their lives as a whole, their careers, their families, outside of sometimes a brief mention of their children or grandchildren. But these were women with rich lives who were all cut short because of Robinson's alleged crimes. If you recall, an attorney in the case described Robinson as sadosexual. At least in the cases of Redmond and Smith, the first two of the victims linked to him. The term sadosexual refers to someone who derives sexual pleasure in response to extreme pain, suffering, or humiliation of others. The women he allegedly preyed upon may have consented to sexual activity when they visited his hotel room, But this would explain why, despite that, he allegedly carried out assumed sexual violence which progressed to murder. Of course, we also can't assume they were visiting with that intention. For instance, Beth Redmond told her daughter she was there watching football. It's so scary to think about how many other victims Robinson could have out there if he is indeed the murderer responsible for these deaths. Since the court proceedings haven't yet taken place, he's still innocent until proven guilty, of course. But with addresses dotting the Upper East Coast over his adult lifetime, along with the FBI's seeming certainty that he did not begin allegedly killing with these victims, there could be a startling number of victims out there. Of course, if you have any information or have ever met Anthony Robinson, please call one of those tip lines. I will put the phone numbers for those in the show notes for you as well. You can find me on social media at obscureappalachia. If you haven't yet left a review for the show on your podcast provider, those are helpful for encouraging more people to listen to the show. If you'd like to support the podcast and get bonus episodes, visit patreon.com/obscureappalachia. The most recent Patreon exclusive episode is a compilation of the many EVPs and 2 apparitions caught on police body cam footage coincidentally during the investigation of family annihilator Chris Watts. I know my patrons are so sick of hearing this line, but it is hands down the strongest evidence for the paranormal and an afterlife that I've ever seen. As always, thank you for listening. Until next time.